Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Jeff Mosher, Adam Kaplan here, and we are really excited about this episode. We have turned the page, and we are now entering Season 3 of ITB. And Adam, if we can just take a second to reflect, when
Sure.
Season 2 began, we had about August of this time last year, we had a new logo. We had a new logo, which was about it, and we didn't have much. But now we've got another new logo, which people can see on our website, InsideTheBirds.com. We've got a weekly newsletter that details all of our ITB pods and stories and contests and giveaways that will start this week. So if you can subscribe, you can go to InsideTheBirds.com and subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll be very happy to send it to you. And you'll be able to see what we're doing and any giveaways, prizes, things like that. And you'll also notice, Adam, that our website is redesigned. So it's got our new logos, has a nice user-friendly layout. So we're just excited. It's Season 3, and we're ready to get going.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So you just sign up, and any announcements, you'll be the first to hear about it. We'll probably, Jeff, I'm thinking we put it on our email first, and then we announce it on Twitter, whatever we have to announce. But that's really cool. And the logos, folks, before we move on here, it's funny. So our business manager, Josh Weinfeld, said, guys, I need pictures of you. Have your wives take the pictures. So I'm like, okay. So our wives took pictures. I didn't think the logos would be this lifelike. Oh my God.
Yeah. It's pretty funny. I was blown away.
Yeah. I was kind of shocked, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I get somewhat pleasantly surprised.
Right.
Less gruesome than I thought. But anyway.
And just think, we're very pumped about Season 3, and we really appreciate all of our listeners have made this happen. All of our viewers, all the people who've corresponded with us have made this happen because they keep us going, and they've allowed us to turn this into a little business of ours. And if you just think back, last year in August, as I mentioned, there was no Inside the Birds YouTube channel. There was no InsideTheBirds.com, no Inside the Birds Facebook page or community group, and no newsletter or anything like what we've announced today. So we've grown exponentially in just 1 year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where we're at this time next August. And again, it's all because of our listeners, our viewers, our people who interact with. We interact with them all the time, and they're great. And I just think we got to thank them for everything.
Yeah, really. And I could thank you for accepting my call 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, whatever it was, in 2018. Thank God you said yes. Yeah, it was like it was. But special kudos also to our business manager, Josh Weinfeld, who's been invaluable. Really, there would be no show without him. So he's.
That's right.
And we've got a lot of announcements coming over the next 2 or 3 weeks. One big one we're hoping for. It'll be the biggest one we've ever had, but we'll see. We're a long way away from that. But Jeff, let's get to it. It's our Eagles training camp notebook. Number 4, it's Monday morning. People are driving into work, no matter where you live, unless you're, of course, in the West Coast. But it was, Jeff, as you know, it was the first full week in pads. And as we noted last week, you get 14 padded days to do it, and a lot happened.
Yes. Not only was it the first week in pads, but it was also the first scrimmage, which they did on Friday, where it was tackling to the ground, not just thud. Doug Peterson talked about it being very interesting. It sounded like first team versus first team was more thud. Second team, he was really getting those guys to do tackling to the ground more. And that makes sense if you think about it. I mean, a lot of the guys that we talk about who are going to be starters, your guys like Deshaun Jackson, guys like Carson, guys like Lane, guys like, Darius Slay, they know what to do. It's the young guys that they're trying to incorporate and get in there, the rookies, and we'll talk about them, who really needed that game feel, that action, that put the pads on and tackle somebody, because they're still getting tested every day, unlike anybody else, because this is all new to them. So it was really interesting format, and the pads are still out. We'll see how this week goes. But I think in this episode, Adam, one thing we can start to do is talk about separation as far as, where players are starting to fit, and how depth chart might be starting to look, and where in the evaluation phase the Eagles staff and their coaches are. So we'll do all that. We'll get into it. We'll talk about some of the new injuries. First, I just mentioned, Adam, it's Season 3, right? So we've already introduced them as a sponsor, but I want to reiterate how proud we are to partner with Philly's own Stateside Vodka. They are the fastest growing craft spirit in Pennsylvania and the first vodka on the market, as we keep saying, to actively hydrate the consumer with an electrolyte composition. What can be better than that? I mean, Stateside is headquartered in Kensington, Philly, 7 times distilled, certified gluten-free, top-of-the-line premium vodka. You guys know we love supporting Philadelphia and locally owned businesses, which is why we're so excited about Stateside Vodka. And I always say this, when you're thinking about buying that Tito's, remember, they're operated down in Cowboys country in Texas. So think to yourself, do I want to support Cowboys or do I want to support the Eagles? You know the answer. There's no better vodka than Stateside. It's award-winning, produced by Philly. So go to statesidevodka.com for 10% off the best vodka out there with the promo code BIRDS on pickup or delivery, because that's right, they deliver to the counties of Philadelphia, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, Bucks, Westmoreland, or Allegheny. They deliver. So supporting Stateside Vodka is also supporting Inside the Birds. We've got cool things cooking up with them on a fantasy football league promo, and we're excited to kick things off with Stateside. And remember, promo code BIRDS for 10% off Philly's own Stateside Vodka. Let's get into what we can here, Adam. I think it's important to also go through some of the injuries, right? So
Sure.
there have been some new ones on the list. What do we know about Andre Dillard? That's kind of a sort of a big one. Obviously, he's left tackle, and there's a lot of microscope on him pretty much this camp.
Yeah, they were looking at his arm as he walked off. The trainers were. Then and we don't know exactly what it is yet. He needs the reps. There's no question. He needs the reps. And he had, as you first noted a couple weeks ago, he had a minor knee injury. Then he came back. He was getting reps. Then he leaves. So that's important that he gets his reps, and hopefully he'll be back soon.
Right.
Jordan Mailata filled in. We on our last show, folks, if you've not heard it, we detailed where Jordan's at. He's their top backup right and left tackle. So we'll keep an eye on that. And Mailata, despite some of the reporting that's out there or opinions of some of the media that's out there, he is not struggling at all. That's actually false, according to 2 Eagle sources. He's in a learning phase. Remember, folks, he couldn't practice for 2 weeks because he was on the COVID list. He's progressing, but the progression is slow because he's just getting back.
Right.
He missed significant time, so he needs to get back. But no, he's not. And see, here's the problem. And I spoke about this last show. When I've been wrong on how players have looked, it's because I would cherry pick one drill or a couple plays and go, oh, this guy had 2 bad snaps. He must have had a bad practice. Well, no, you need to ask people who have access, real access, and who are actually grading these players. And the word I got from a couple people was he's been just okay, but that was expected because he just got back. So I think sometimes they're a little bit hard on players, especially with offensive linemen, Jeff. If you're not studying them, snap, 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 you're probably going to be wrong.
Right. That's fair. I was going to add to that what you just said, that the word I got from a team source was up and down, I believe. But there was not concern. Same person noted the COVID list and coming back from everything like that. So no reason to be concerned for Jordan Mailata, at least not at this stage. Is Josh Perkins someone you think we've spoke enough about? He's kind of this hybrid wide receiver tight end. When we talk about wide receivers, we don't really talk about Josh Perkins. And when we talk about tight ends, we don't really talk about Josh Perkins. But he is somebody, in all fairness, who caught some pretty big passes last year in December. We talk about Greg Ward and the big catches he came up with. Josh Perkins caught a few too.
Yeah, look, this is his 3rd year with the team. This is a guy that they know. Now he suffered an upper body injury. He's supposedly going to be out a while.
That's too bad.
Now the question is, because now they're down to just 3 healthy tight ends, do they need to go out and sign a veteran?
It depends, right? Because
Caleb Wilson, I'm sorry, is still on the roster. Caleb.
Yeah. They've been impressed with the rookie free agent that they signed, Noah Tongiai. Did I pronounce that correctly?
It's Tongiai, correct. Yeah, that is what I sent you. It is pronounced Tongiai.
Tongiai.
Yes. I got to say it quick. Let me do it again because I haven't gotten it right. I've tried it 5 times. Tongiai. All right, we got it. There you go. You actually had it right the first time, I think.
I was told that they were into him when they signed him, that they thought he had a pretty decent chance to make the team. And by all accounts, he's had a pretty good camp. Now, I don't know, like let's say Ertz is hurt or Goddard's hurt. during the regular season if you're comfortable with Tanguy being your number 2 tight end. So you raise a good point about bringing in a veteran. You know, they had Alex Ellis last year. Didn't they cut him but then bring him back pretty early in the season?
Yeah, he was with another team up to about 2 days ago. I think he was cut. So, he's out there. I think they have to keep an eye on it. And Dallas Goedert, by the way, was working Sunday. It was surprising. He suffered the way it was explained to me, the broken thumb that he has, it's in a good area. If you're ever going to have a broken thumb, it's in a workable area, as was explained to me. So it wasn't a big deal. But I was not expecting him to start working on Sunday. So Boston Scott, by the way, was back. Zach Ertz is back. Lane Johnson has a lower body injury. He's day-to-day. Matt Pryor, by the way, filled in at right tackle. Robert Davis has a lower body injury. He's week to week. Robert Davis is not going to make the team anyway, but he's going to be out a bit.
This is going to be a big week. I mean, some of these players you just mentioned are coming back. They're going to be in pads some of these practices, and they're going to do another scrimmage at some point. Do we have the official word on when their next scrimmage is, Adam?
I do not, but I will be there later today, Monday, and I'll also be there Wednesday.
Okay.
So I will ask later today when the scrimmage is going to be, and if I could get there, I'll get there.
Okay.
I was also going to try to get to Giants camp, but I don't know if I'm going to make it. And I have to find out when Washington is also going to see how far they're going to go in camp. But they were in pads, and they have up to 14 days, as we said earlier, to be in pads. And they've hit, and they've had thud period, which is when you hit with an elbow or a forearm, or you shove the person, but you don't take them to the ground. But they have had tackling periods. Now, the tackling periods, Jeff, when I first started covering the league in 99, 2000 area, those tackling periods might be 20 to 30 minutes. Now they're like 3 to 5 minutes.
Right.
So, and they're usually situational. It could be goal line, red zone, something like that. But it's just not like that. But it's not like it used to be. But it is important, though. You got to hit, and you got to tackle. And maybe in that scrimmage, as you were saying, maybe they'll do it then.
Well, we've got a big week ahead. There was a big week behind. It was upsetting, not upsetting, but disappointing that there was a stomach illness going on, and a couple of guys missed the scrimmage. Right, that you were hoping to see how they performed in the live scrimmage, but they'll get a chance. Those who missed it will probably get that chance, hopefully coming up soon. It was just an inopportune time for that. But we do have some evaluations we're going to go through real quick. I want to remind everybody, download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app today. Use the code ITB for a special offer when you sign up. That is code ITB for a special offer when you sign up only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, let's get into the offense. You want to talk about Sudfeld again? Because I know last week you had mentioned that the feedback was that he was inconsistent, and the type of inconsistency that someone in year 17, 4 should not have at this point.
Yeah, so basically, Jeff, he's had one issue, and it was the same issue as last summer, pulling the trigger on throws. The thing that really impressed the Eagles, particularly their front office and coaching staff in 2017, is how aggressive a thrower he was. 2018, pretty similar. 2019, didn't have a great training camp before he got hurt, and then you saw Josh McCown come in. But Doug Peterson did confirm that he's a number 2. He was asked, which is a very fair question, considering the reporters who have been there know everyone saw it. Quarterbacks are very easy to evaluate in training camp, but you can't see 2 or 3 throws. You need to see most of the throws that they make. The thing about Nate that had made him really special to them is his willingness to make tough throws and to just drive the football, because he has a good arm. And the issues leading up to the last couple days where we're not pulling the trigger. And this is a problem, because in this offense, there's so many plays to be made, and the Eagles have much more speed now, and he's got to do it. He's on a 1-year deal here, so he's got to prove it with what they have left in training camp. Again, there's no preseason, Jeff. They don't have that to go back on, so he's got to get the job done this next week.
It surprises me a little, because there's also not a lot of, well, I shouldn't say. I was going to say there's not a lot of pressure on Nate from behind, because I think Doug has even said that Nate is the number 2 quarterback. He said it in his most recent press conference. He didn't. As nice as Jalen Hurts looked, we've talked about how difficult it would be for Jalen to win that backup job. But I do suppose, just like last year, even though that might have been more injury related, that the Eagles could go out there and still bring in a veteran. So I can't say it's pressure free, but he should feel like, hey, this is my job. You know, I'm the number 2 quarterback. I'm the backup quarterback. Let me go out there and let it rip and try to make some plays, you know, and I don't know what his mentality is. I don't know if he's feeling the crunch from Jalen Hurts or not.
Yeah, it's always, but see, I don't think he is, just based on what happened last summer, because he was having the same issue about pulling the trigger.
Right.
And he was just not comfortable last summer.
So it's just trusting his eyes and his instincts.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Great way to frame it. That's it's I remember I mentioned this on the last show that Ron Jaworski and Greg Cosell would always tell me that the thing with quarterbacks is, are you getting a clear picture of what you're looking at? They can't answer why they're not, but they could tell you that's what happens when you're not pulling the trigger. You're not getting a clear picture. Now, the way coaches tell me, I've talked to so many coaches about this over the years. When a quarterback is struggling and not pulling the trigger, give them easy throws. Let him complete it. Then ask him to throw it a little bit farther downfield, get his confidence up. Then hopefully he'll let it rip. That's just that's all you can do.
That is all you can do. All right, so let's talk about running back, because as we traded notes a little bit, we both had very similar information on this, and that's, you know, it seems like the Eagles are top heavy and bottom heavy at this position, meaning they've got their guys that you know are going to be on the team, and that's Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, and it looks like Corey Clement's going to be on the team.
Yeah, he should be. Yeah, he should be.
After that, I think they were hoping that either Elijah Holyfield or Mike Warren or Adrian, one of those three was really going to step up. And certainly they've gotten a lot of reps this last week because Scott and Sanders were out. And even Corey, I think, missed one day. But it just sounds like these guys have to like do more to really win a job. And there's more time. I'm just saying that no one's getting wowed by anything that they're seeing from the rookie free agents. That's how it was fed to me.
Yeah. I the way in my notes I sent you, I said none of them stood out. They had their own moments where they flashed, but no one has been like, oh my goodness, like obviously Clement did. Is the best example of 2017. Where like, okay, this kid is an undrafted free agent, but he does so much. He's going to be on our football team. That has not happened yet. And the problem is, without a preseason where they could shine, these guys have basically a week. This week, Jeff, they've got like 4 practices or so, and that's really going to be it, because the following week, the first week of September, they're turning the page to week 1. They're going to have 2 weeks of practices for week 1, really. They're instead of doing the 4th preseason week, which would be whoever they're preparing for, they don't have that because they don't have any preseason games. So the fact is here that when you look at it, they're going to have to start standing out here, because the good thing is they offer something different. Killins is a change up, Warren with size, and Holyfield with size. So we'll see what happens.
I'm going to say, I'm probably said this twice already in this pod, and I think I'm going to wind up saying it a few more times. And you just said it too, because we know it's true. This is a big week for Eagles training camp. I mean, this is really, I don't want to call it the final week evaluation, because you still have that 1 week prior to when you start preparation for the regular season. But Doug and his staff, they want to kind of, you know, it's late in training camp that you start to have your look team and your Washington and your New York and your you start to get ready for them. So this is a big evaluation week. They really need to know who's settled. And when we talk about running back here, Adam, after those 3, usually the Eagles have kept 4 or 5 in the past few years. So if they're not really wowed by Holyfield or Mike Warren or Killins, that might kind of intensify their effort to want to bring in a veteran after the cutdown.
Fair point. Or they're definitely going to have at least one of them on the practice squad. It's a matter of who does well. But with Clement's injury history, now I know he's having a good camp and he looks great, but with his injury history, I just think it's a little bit risky, because they need an answer. This is what we've been talking about the last couple of months. If you're new to our show, we outlined this when I reported the Carlos Hyde stuff. My understanding was they were looking for an answer if Sanders got hurt. Now, one thing we've talked about is Boston Scott. Let's talk about him before we move on to receiver. This guy is really talented. He's an incredible find for them. But the question would be, Jeff, how much volume could he handle if Sanders were to suffer an injury?
Yeah, that seems to be the question we've mulled over, and I still, going back to what we said in the last podcast, if Miles Sanders were to get hurt, I think it's a Corey Clement / Boston Scott show, as long as those guys are healthy. I think Clement's going to be your first, second down guy. Scott can be your second, and third down guy. I mean, they both catch the ball well, and you can use them interchangeably. I don't want to pigeonhole one or the other. I just think that Corey is a more natural first down downhill runner when he gets the ball, and I think Boston's better used in a move situation where you can get him in open space. So clearly, Doug is creative enough to occasionally get Boston in there on a first down and Corey on a third down. I'm not suggesting that they're locked into these roles and they never change, but that's how I feel right now. And I do think when I think about that, knowing that Corey's been hurt a lot, knowing that Boston's pretty young, I think if I were Howie, I would really be looking at that, cut down waiver list just to see if there's a guy there who can help me in those situations, and worth the spot.
With size. Right. With size, because remember, the Eagles were not good with the running backs in short yardage last season. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the numbers that were sent to me were they needed to be better. So there's situationally, the Eagles have a lot of versatility with Sanders and Scott. Now, I know people pointing to both Giants games when he had volume, but my point is not 2 games. If could Scott be a 6 to 8 game starter or main ball carrier? I don't know that, and that's why they wanted an answer, and they thought High would be that guy, but they did not want to pay a lot of money, and they still don't, as I understand it. So that's running back. Now, wide receiver, Jeff.
Yes.
J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I'll tell you what, I'm not putting the cart before the horse here, but he's improving, and you had outlined for listeners a couple weeks ago the slot position. I wasn't told specifically that about the slot, but he looks, without better phrasing, I'm just going to say it, like a different player. And he probably knows the offense. Number one, two, he's healthier. He's healthy.
Yes.
So that helps him. So he's getting better. He's not there yet, Jeff, but he's definitely getting better.
He is. I'm told he's been at the X and the slot. So, I mean, he is moving around a little bit. They're finding the best role for him. Look, if you listen to any of our podcasts, right, Adam, the one thing we talk about with wide receiver is, what are the 2 things you wanted to see going into this year's camp? If you were to pick 2 things, you would say, one, you want to see J.J. Arcega-Whiteside show that he's developed and healthy from last year, right? You want to be something to be optimistic about after a really bad rookie year. Well, check so far, check mark. And number 2, you would say, I want to see the first-round pick, Jalen Reagor. I want to know that he's developing and that the coaches and that the team really like what they've seen. Check. Because they certainly have. And so when you just look at the overall picture here, knowing the Eagles play a lot of 12 personnel and they only have 2 wide receivers on the field at one time, and one of them, when healthy, will be Deshaun, it's good to know that both Jalen and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside right now, as we sit here today, have done what's asked of them. Okay, I mean, that's good. That's a good thing, because if they weren't, then we'd be in a lot of trouble here. If Reagor was dropping passes everywhere and didn't look like he could play at this level, if Arcega-Whiteside didn't look like he could catch anything, we'd have some real problems right now.
And JJ talked about he's in much better physical shape, so that's a good thing. Let's get to Reagor. We haven't talked about it a lot since we have had training camp shows. Talk about it a little bit. We know he stood out. So, Jeff, what have you heard on Reagor?
So I was told that he had some wow practices. And I said, wow, okay. Well, that kind of matches what's been out there publicly, right? Because I believe both Doug and Carson Wentz, and listen, I'm not on this bandwagon. They said it, but they made a comparison between Reagor and Julio Jones. And I looked into that. And the feedback I got was obviously not in size. They are not comparable in size.
Yeah, he's 5 inches shorter, yeah.
Right, but in explosion and strength, not just, you can be a small guy, but when you catch that ball and you can turn, pivot, shake a tackle, you can hold on to it, make a contested catch. He was very good at contested catches at TCU, and certainly last year his quarterback gave him a lot of contested ones because he wasn't playing with a very good quarterback. But this is what I'm told he has done very well, and that's why you hear those ridiculous, and I'll say it, ridiculous comparisons, because Julio, they shouldn't do that, to be honest with you. I don't like.
But here's the term, though. Well, that's a little bit too much to say Julio Jones, because you're putting a lot on him. I know what you're getting at, but the term that I was explaining to me, his play strength is off the hook.
Yes.
His play strength is Really good. Now, it helps that he's really built very strong. As I said on the last show, Jeff, it's very rare to see a receiver who's got that type of play strength and speed. He just happens to have both.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that you don't need to be 6'3" to like Julio Jones.
Right.
But Reagor is under 5'11", but he's built like a rock, and he's also explosive. Because usually when these guys are jacked up like that, they're not very fast and explosive, but he happens to be. And the hands have been good. Like, not great, but good, I've been told so far. So that's great, man, that he's off to a good start. And he needs to be because, as I've said for weeks now, he's going to play a lot this season.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the challenge for him, and obviously Aaron Moorhead as well because he's coaching him, there's going to be a rookie wall here at some point in the season. There's going to be a point where he's seeing coverages he's never seen, and then he's got to respond. And obviously coaching is very important. So Aaron Moorhead's going to earn his money because they've got some rookies that they're really excited about, Hightower and Watkins, and Reagor's the one we know for sure is going to play, and he's going to have to play because not only is he a first-round pick, you had outlined for our listeners back in May after the draft that you were hearing their plan to use him. And by golly, Jeff, my understanding is they're lining him up everywhere.
Yeah, and by the way, I want to add to that a term that I was told that Jalen, what they really see from Jalen in practice that they're impressed with is separation at the top of the route. So, like, we talked last week about the Deshaun Jackson versus Darius Slay video. Right? Do you remember that
Yes.
Chad Johnson?
How could I forget?
That's an example of separation off the snap. You know, you see him, he does that hesitated release, and then he's bam, and he's open, right? Reagor is showing, and a lot of times a wide receiver will get some good coverage in the first 5-10 yards of the route, but then they'll plant their foot and be able to either break in or break out or come back, and that's where they start to separate from really good press coverage. Or the corner could be playing off them. And so the first 5 yards, they've got that corner has only a few yards to say close the cushion because he's playing off coverage. But still, if you can plant, pivot, and go, break in quickly or break out sharply and get that separation, that's at the top of the route because that's where the top of the stem is. And so this is something that Jalen is showing that he's really good at, which is what you want to see from an X receiver because those guys are going to see a lot of press coverage and a lot of tight coverage. So if their second move can get them the ball open or they can make those catches in windows, that's fantastic. So it's good to hear that Jalen's been doing that. And
by the way, the X receiver, you don't need to be 6'3" to be an X receiver. You have to have very good play strength if you're shorter.
Mm-hmm.
He just happens to have that, so that'll help him over time be their X. He could replace Deshaun Jackson and Z in the future, but we'll see if Arcega-Whiteside could be the replacement for Jeffrey at X. Mm-hmm. He's got to show it first. I know they drafted him to be that guy that we know, but he needs to show it. And Reagor you could line him up anywhere because he played slot in college. He's got multiple position versatility. We love that. So that's what I got receiver. I don't have anything on.
No, that's
pretty good. I know people are going crazy on Deontay Burnett, but I guess some of the reporters said he's been doing well, and I've heard the same. But he's a long shot to make it. See, here's the thing about receiver before we move to tight end and offensive line. If they go just 3 running backs, that'll help them keep 6 receivers.
Mm-hmm.
But if they go 4 or 5 running backs, which they're not going 5, they could keep 4. That's going to hurt them because when you go heavy somewhere else, Jeff, as you know, you go thinner elsewhere. So
right.
There's going to be a big challenge here for the coaches to really evaluate these guys the right way along with the front office because they're seeing the same practice tape. But I know the front office does listen to the coaches pretty well, so we'll see what happens.
All right. Remember this route, the deep dig. I think that's going to be a pretty good route for the X position from Reagor and maybe somebody else. Okay, Adam, let's talk a little bit about the offensive line. Obviously, if you're watching practice or seeing what the reporters are tweeting, you'd be really worried because and Jason Kelce admitted it. They did not have a very good scrimmage the other day. And cause for concern yet, or let's start with like individuals. What are you hearing about Jason Peters?
Yeah, I don't think we've talked about him because I know he missed some time. So what I had heard is that he's starting to settle in at right guard. Not every snap's good. Some aren't great. But he's so crafty and smart. He's starting to understand the hand usage. He's far from perfect. So you always have to remember, and Todd Herman's talked about this when he came on our show. When you move, Todd moved he played both right and left tackle for the Eagles, but when he moved inside, he now has someone to his right and left. When you're playing a tackle, you're not worrying about someone who's to your right side, or if you're left tackle, you're not worried about that way. So now Jason has to look at, he's in a box now when you play inside at guard. So it's just a little bit different for him. But the way it's explained to me is he's starting to settle in. They're not worried about him at all. I still do think, though, the first few weeks are probably going to be challenging for him once the regular season starts, just because it's real football, it's tackle, it's going to be fast. Because you remember, as Todd told us, the players are right up on you. The defensive line are right up on you when you're playing inside. So that's just going to be different. And you know, Jeff, you talked about the scrimmage. See, the key for him is they've got to simulate some stuff here. I know you don't want to go too heavy in practice because you don't want, you just don't do that. You don't get guys hurt. But you got to get him used to that contact. One-on-ones are one thing, and 11-on-11s are one thing without contact. But at some point, he's got to have guys coming at him in a big way. So we're really not going to know exactly where he's at for sure until they get into the regular season and you got guys coming at you who are opponents.
That's going to be an interesting conversation that we're going to have probably a week before the season opener about that, because if he's still, even if he's rusty and he's not looking great, you kind of wonder what the coaches are going to do to compensate. You can run more. And not that a right guard's not important in outside zone, but I mean, obviously less pulling and power, or maybe you run more power and just get him going forward and you do less of the outside zone. I don't know, but pass protection's really the number one. You're talking about that, that Washington line that's got Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne and Sweat and Kerrigan and Chase Young. I mean, you can't really have too much slippage up front.
Yeah. Look, it's going to be challenging, so I look forward to seeing how he does. Well, but what I heard is he's getting better. The reporters were right. From what I'm told, the defense clearly is ahead of the offense, which is no surprise. And don't forget, you have so many new coaches on offense, and that you're going to have different ideas. You've got the 2 offensive line changes.
Right.
You've got a bunch of young receivers who are in there. You got changes here, and it's just going to take time. They didn't have 2 months of off-season practices. Talking to coaches, Jeff, around the league before we get to defense, I'm hearing some of this. I'm hearing from other coaches that there's struggles sometimes in offense because you've got changes, you've got new players. And by the way, the defense knows your offense.
Right.
they know the snap count, they know the plays. So, yeah, they're going to have an advantage.
All right. Well, that's something obviously we're going to be keeping our eyes on.
Sure.
Let's go to defense first. I want to thank our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They are great affiliates, and they are always enhancing the fan experience with their coverage of all 4 Philly sports teams like nobody else. Now, I bet if you went over to PHLSportsNation.com right now, you could find a scathing critique of the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen, because I don't know if
they
there's
better.
a good ththing. And along with one of Brett Brown's coaching, so we can get, we'll save our rants. But go to PHL Sports Nation to get that kind of information and that kind of analysis. They are for the fan, by the fan. It's a great motto. Good chance for the fans to really get in and have their voices heard. So follow them on Twitter at PHL Sports Nation. Remember their website, PHLSportsNation.com. All right, let's also pause 1 second for a word from our great sponsors. All right, the defense, Adam. Let us start with the defensive line. And as I've said before, I'll say it again, big week for these guys. Big week for the big fellas.
Yeah, it was. And I'll tell you what, just one little note here. I could have saved this to week 1, but I just wanted to point something out because Josh Sweat has been doing so well. And Curry showed up in really good shape, and he's giving them good snaps when they need him on the field. They've got a pretty good rotation of the 4 DNs. It would not surprise me at all, Jeff, in week 1 versus Washington, particularly because it usually out east folks who, if you live out west or down south, typically in Washington, New York, Philly, it's very humid and hot in September. Do not be surprised if the Eagles rotate liberally at defensive end. I just see it because these guys, Curry really had a good year last season. I don't think people understand how well he played. And Josh Sweat really did improve, and he's an improving player. So you don't need to overwork Graham, particularly because he's older, obviously. And we'll see on Barnett because don't forget Barnett's come back from injury. But Graham, you don't have to play him every snap. You've got guys who can play, and you can get a good rotation going. And they're going to be so deep at D tackle. So no one really needs to be overworked week 1.
And you just mentioned the depth at D tackle. Remember, when they rush the passer, they're not going 3 defensive ends, 1 gets kicked inside, most likely. As long as Hargrave is healthy and Malik Jackson's healthy and Fletcher Cox is healthy, 2 of those 3 are going to be on the field when they want to rush the passer. For most times. I'm sure Jim's going to mix it up a little bit, but that will enable you to play Sweat and Curry on the outside as your second team DNs a little bit more, and then that gives Barnett and Graham a break. It helps them stay healthy, helps them stay fresh for the fourth quarter. I think you're right. It's a good thing. I specifically asked about Sweat because I know he's played well, and you said it too. I asked, is he playing well as an edge rusher, or is he moving inside a nickel where they had him last year for some of the year? And I was told as an edge rusher, so that's good. That's what you want. That's really his natural position. He is a guy who has long arms, so you can move him inside. And you saw them do that last year, but by the end of the year, as we said, Vinny Curry was doing a better job of it, and he got the opportunity.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, and the thing with Sweat is he's got that clowny body. He's long, 6'5", unbelievably long arms. I don't have it in front of me. I think he's got over 35-inch arms, which is ridiculously long.
Yes.
He's not going to be super explosive because of the one leg that had the issue when he was growing up, but he's come a long way here, and right now he's proven to be a pretty good 3rd-round pick. So Jeff, also here's another question. So we already know who the top 4 are. Right. Who's number 5, and what else are you hearing?
It's a great question. It's funny. I asked somebody I asked someone. I said, how's this race for the 5th defensive end spot going? And mentioned all the candidates, and the answer I got was, I said, who's in the lead? The answer I got was no one. And that's just. It's not, and that's not to suggest that everybody's playing poorly. I want everybody to understand that. For example, Casey Toohill, he's actually shown a pretty high motor, and they're pleased with what they've seen. It's just very unlikely for a 7th-round pick to be able to beat out the guys in front of him as a rookie to make the team. Jannard Avery is a guy that they like, and that was the guy I was told if they had to pick today would probably be the leader. But the big issue with him, Adam, and we've talked about it, is the functional strength. He's a little guy. He's a speed rusher. He's not necessarily a guy who's going to be out there to stop the run. He's not a well-rounded type of pass rusher. He is, as you've talked about a lot, speed rusher, which they need, and that's probably why he'd be the leader right now. But Osman, who's coming off the ACL, has been coming on, I'm told. This is a big, big week for Sharif Miller because he's a 4th-round pick. It's his 2nd year, so it's time for him to, show what he's got. And he missed, Adam, that scrimmage because he was one of the guys that I believe that was out with the illness. And so, you know what? There's competition here. He's got to show up this week.
He does, and he's got an opportunity to put some weight on. And Joe Osman, I'm told, is close to where he was before the injury. You're right. He's improved. So that's kind of it. The question there is, again, if they're going to keep 5 and probably 6, they're not going to keep 7. The question is, if you go heavy there, where else are you going to go late? It does impact, like receiver, them keeping 6 versus 5.
Right.
Or 4 versus 3 running backs. That's just the way it is, folks. You can't keep everybody, and sometimes it's a good problem to have because you have a better roster. Right. And they're going to have some tougher decisions than I imagined when I first started looking at the roster. Just started doing my initial 53 a couple weeks ago. Because certain things are developing. We're going to get the linebacker in about 2 seconds here, but it is good that Joe Osman, who's a NovaCare building favorite, there's no other way to say it. Everybody loves this kid, and he's come a long way here. It's a good story.
I think it's a pretty fascinating competition, right? You got a 4th-round pick in Sharif Miller, which is a fairly high enough pick to want to be invested in. You have a locker room favorite, like you just said, coaching staff favorite in Osman, and you've got a guy you traded for who has a trait that you just don't see in everybody else, that speed rush that you get from Jannard Avery. So it's 3 guys and probably 1 spot, maybe 2, you never know, but probably 1. That's a pretty good competition right there.
It is. It is. The only reason why they would keep 7, which is absurd, because they don't want to expose one of these guys to waivers because they want him on the practice squad.
Right.
But obviously they can get claimed. But yeah, 7 is just not happening.
Right.
And you keep 5. The question is, do you keep 6? I believe they'll keep 6.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of how they do it. And now let's get the linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
They still have 7 on the roster. We know who their top 3 are. Edwards, TJ Edwards has had a good camp.
Right.
Riley and Nate Gary, who's a favorite of the linebackers coach Ken Flagel.
Mm-hmm.
But, man, after that, Jeff, who's 4, who's 5, who's 6?
Well,
How many do you think they keep?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sean Bradley continues to have a good
right.
camp. And again, when you have a good camp and you're playing for the Eagles and you're a linebacker, yes, you're having a good camp, but that doesn't mean you're an emerging star linebacker. It just means you're doing well on a team that's not very blessed with great linebacker talent. So Sean Bradley, Alex Singleton, and, Davion Taylor's going to make the team, Adam. We know that, but it's very unlikely that he's going to be out there on defense, at least for the first who knows how long. Maybe all year he's a special teamer. We'll see. This is a position I think they have to do something at, Adam. Don't you think so?
I'm surprised they haven't signed a veteran. Well, let's put it this way. I don't see them keeping more than 5. There's really no point in it because they're so heavy nickel. You only need 2 backups. If you're a heavy nickel team, you only need 2 backups. So they can go light there. Now, let's move to defensive back. The one guy we barely talked about, I mentioned him last week. He continues to do well. Is Nicole Roby-Coleman, who's going to be their slot corner.
Mm-hmm.
He might be short, 5'7" and 0.2 of an inch, but man, he's explosive. He's a top 5 slot corner anyway.
Right.
He's a good football player, and so far he looks the part. He looks like the guy they thought they were signing this spring.
When they signed him, Adam, one person specifically told me that one of the things the Eagles really like about him is his ability to get his hands on the football. He's I didn't have the stat in front of me at the time or whether they gave it to me, but they felt he was among the top nickel corners at pass breakups. And in camp, he's been showing that. He's been getting his hands on the foot. He doesn't intercept a ton of passes, but he breaks up a lot. So that's good. You'll take that. That gets you off the field on 3rd down. And so that's a big part of what he does.
Correct. And then we had questions that we haven't really talked about Kayvon Wallace. So I heard he's a long ways away from being able to contribute.
Yeah,
he's in the learning phase. Nothing. Look, he wasn't going to play anyway this season because they've got the 3 safeties who they absolutely love, who are all going to play. And Parks is their 3rd safety, but he could actually be their 2nd, depending on what the game plan is that week.
Right.
And then Rudy Ford's a special teams ace. And you mentioned Marcus Epps was doing well the previous show. So Wallace is going to make the team. I don't see him playing at all in defense. Maybe a snap here or there. It's going to be on special teams.
Yeah, certainly for the start. I heard the same thing. And I think people were hoping to hear a little more because they're very excited for him. And there's no reason not to be. I mean, it's a tough – I think it was Jim Schwartz who said safety and – was it linebacker are the 2 most difficult positions for rookies to get on the field for in year 1, especially when they're not first-round picks. So, I mean, you have so much – when you're a safety in this defense, you have so many spots and so many responsibilities to learn. You have to be trusted. And then, you've got a couple of guys ahead of you right now in Mills, in McLeod, in Parks, and even with Epps playing well. So you can understand if it takes a little bit to get Kayvon Wallace on the field. Kayvon Wallace.
Correct. So, Jeff, do you want to get to the Ask ITB questions? We've got a bunch of them.
I'm glad we were able to bring this segment back. We'll get to a few of them. Let us start with a question that we got from Twitter, at Chemo3006806. Is that a bot account, Adam, that you're pulling these questions
No, it's
from?
real.
All right, because usually one with all the numbers are bots. But anyway.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, could the Eagles possibly trade for Yannick Ngakoue or Earl Thomas? I don't know if you've listened to our show before. We've probably talked about Ngakoue going back to March, 10 times. In my reporting, I've made it very clear. They like the player. It's highly unlikely it'll happen. It's complicated. It's partially next year because the cap could be $175 million. They've got, for the first time since Harry Roseman's been a GM, they actually have some real cap issues. Cap means next to nothing, but it does in this case. There's certain things they're going to be able to do to make it reasonable, the cap for themselves next year. It's not just bringing over $20+ million. They have less than $20 million in cap space, but there's certain things they can do. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is, I was told it was highly unlikely in the beginning, and I'm still there. They do like the player, and boy, he would be different from anybody they have because he's a pure. If you think Avery's fast, Jeff, oh my God, this kid, he's really gifted. He's smaller. He's 6'2", but he's one of the fastest edge rushers in the NFL. Earl Thomas, no chance. We can move on.
Right. I think about OCU Manura sometimes when I feel like I hear those small pass rushers.
OCU's bigger though than Ngakoue.
Was he bigger than 6'2"?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
I thought he was a little short. I thought it was right aside. Okay.
No, he's definitely longer than Ngakoue.
Yeah. What about Earl Thomas?
No chance. I didn't even ask because I know they wouldn't go. There's no way. First of all, they're really good at safety. Now, had this happened,
really good. I mean, they're
well,
good.
no, but they
well,
let's put it this way. First of all, okay. Well, let's address this for 30 seconds to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Earl Thomas is 31 years old. He's not the same player he once was. There's a pretty significant issue that happened in April that's been alleged. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. Number two, this is really damning. His teammates, they have a player council. They didn't want him back. End of story.
That's all you need to know. He's been kicked off 2 teams now, basically, in the last 2 years. So.
Well, it's a shame. The guy's probably going to be a Hall of Famer, but it's not good.
Here's the thing, though: is he gonna go to Dallas? I mean, Dallas. And
look, they've had this infatuation with him, right. And they're not very good at safety. But we'll see. Again, they have now information. It's been, if you read any of the beat reporter stuff, they put it all out there. It's some pretty interesting stuff. It's a shame, but again, he's 31 years old, and despite making the Pro Bowl, I was told he was not nearly as good as a Pro Bowl name would give him. He was not the same player. Not bad. I mean, he's better than average to good, but he wasn't great.
Right.
So it makes no sense to me. I didn't even ask because I know it's a non-starter. They're not going that direction.
All right. So next question is from an Apple customer review. The reviewer said, "Hey guys, big fan of the show and info you guys are able to gather and share. My question is regarding Boston Scott. How come he is seen as too small to be a number 1 running back when he is listed as heavier than Austin Eckler and Philip Lindsay and fairly similar in stature to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was an early pick?" I don't think it's just that he's too short. I don't think we've said that. I think we've just talked about. I mean, he's not. First of all, he's not blessed with 4.1, 4.2 breakaway speed, and he was not like a big time recruit coming out of college or anything like that. That doesn't mean he can't be a good player, but I don't think he has the traits that you have, the athleticism of a Clyde Edwards-Helaire who can just basically do everything with the football.
Yeah, just a couple things. Eckler was undrafted. He's way more explosive than Scott. I mean, Boston Scott's been a great find for them. Eckler just signed a pretty significant deal. Philip Lindsay, I had reported back in March that Lindsay would no longer be the starter. I didn't know who they were going to bring in. I just knew that he wasn't going to be the starter.
He led the league in rushing 2 years ago. It's amazing, right?
They were not. They kind of know what he is. I mean, it was an incredible story. He's in their backyard, really, playing in Colorado. But
right.
He's a changeup. He's a pretty interesting player. They just knew he was not going to last as a starting running back. So Boston Scott is not that fast. I'm talking about play speed. Time speed is one thing. Play speed is more important. How fast does he play? He doesn't play as fast as Austin Eckler, but Scott's a good player. Look, I get it's a good question.
Yeah,
fair question. Edwards-Helaire didn't time well, but he plays faster.
Yeah, in fairness, maybe Boston Scott, if he were the number 1 back, maybe he would prove that he's a pretty good back and being overlooked. It's just that the Eagles have not put him in that position yet, and they clearly have Miles Sanders for that role. So, I don't want to ever rule a guy out. I mean, he certainly showed some really good promise and potential when he did get the ball. So I don't want people to get the wrong impression that I think Boston Scott's just a gadget player because that's how the Eagles like to use him.
Oh, way more than that. Way more than that.
Yeah,
but right. But what I would say is he's okay as an inside runner. He is tremendous when you get him in space, particularly as a receiver. Yeah. He's got some make you miss, some shake and bake. He's really an interesting player, but as an inside runner, he's okay. There's nothing special about him. But man, when you get him in space. And he could really catch the ball. I mean, that's what, when I went to OTAs last year, I was like, okay, if this keeps up, here's your replacement for Sproles. Because, look, running back's a very easy position to evaluate. What you see is usually what you get. It's rare that you're fooled. Now, obviously, they were fooled on the kid from San Diego State. Ironically, that's where, kid who's not in the league
Donnell
anymore.
Pumphrey. Donnell Pumphrey.
Then that was the kid who they thought was super explosive. Well, he's small and played small. Boston Scott's small, but he plays big, and there's a big difference in that.
Good way to put it. Love that way you put that. Let's go to another question from, I think, Twitter, Cricket Kelly 11. With Andre Dillard and Jordan Mailata, he says struggling. They're inconsistent. We wouldn't quite call it struggling.
Yeah, he's not struggling.
But it's a good question nonetheless. Is there any chance the Eagles add a veteran guard, especially if they need to move JP over back to tackle via free agency or trade?
I don't think so, because you and I both know, Jeff, that now we'll see what happens the next week or so. But Jack Driscoll's just the way it was explained to me is that he's a find for them in the 4th round. Like he's everything they thought he would be.
Mm-hmm.
And considering he had no offseason and he's not having a preseason, this is good. He's picking everything up that they've asked him. So that's a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
To sign a veteran guard, they would have to think, A, Driscoll can't do it, and Pryor can't do it. But Pryor, to me, is the reason they didn't go out and sign a guard. Why? They went with Peters, obviously, because he has playing experience, obviously, at left tackle, and they felt he could move in a guard. Mm-hmm. And it was, as it was explained to me, it's a collective decision. They all thought that it would work, including Jason, and they want to see it through. And then, Pryor was – now the only reason why it wouldn't be Pryor, and it plays into this question, if they didn't think Pryor was doing well, then they would go sign a veteran guard. Then that would make sense. But I don't get the sense that they're willing to do that yet. I could be wrong, or they could change their mind, but just was checking into a week ago, and it didn't seem like that was going to be on the rise.
Right. Also, sometimes availability, who's available, comes into play. Like you may not be thinking right now, I want to upgrade, but so-and-so player becomes a cut and is available after cut down day and is fairly cheap. And you're like, hey, I'd be stupid if I didn't sign this guy to be a backup because he's good. So we'll see if that happens. But I agree with you. I think that they're looking at what they have in-house first before they do anything like that. Last question from @89 Tremaine on Twitter. Given the receiving success of Miles Sanders and Boston Scott late last season, do you think Carson will be more willing to check the ball down to his backs this season? What a wonderful question.
I love this question.
What a great question.
I love this question. This is drove me. So it's from @89 Tremaine on Twitter. For those of you who have been with us since the beginning in the spring or late spring in 2018, this is the one issue that I've had with Wentz. I know the footwork, as Greg Cosell pointed out, mid-season last year was not great, and his mechanics were off a little bit, and we actually pointed that out. It was particularly in RPOs not resetting his feet. That was one of the things. But the one issue, it's been a constant, and it's not the worst thing in the world. It's actually admirable in a way that he wants to throw the ball downfield or wait till somebody gets open. But when you've got explosiveness, as our follower on Twitter said, and he's right, Sanders and Scott were damn good in the screen game and as a passer. Miles Sanders ran some detailed routes last season. It's pretty amazing for a rookie. To me, if you don't have it, check it the hell down.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't want to do it. By the way, Deshaun Watson, another guy. Deshaun Watson does not like to check the ball down. Mm-hmm. And it's admirable for both these quarterbacks, but you've got – now the difference might be Carson's got these two special kids in the pass game, and maybe Watson doesn't. Mm-hmm. But, man, when it's there, check it down.
To me, Carson is very willing to throw to his running back on design plays, like those HB go routes we saw with Miles Sanders against Minnesota and Detroit, and screens,
yes.
Right? Or quick hits that are intended to. But in those situations where he thinks he can make something happen and there is a guy open in the flat, we detailed it many times, as you said, he doesn't go for that. And I can understand it a little bit in the past. Maybe you don't trust Wendell Smallwood because he doesn't have the greatest hands, but now you have Miles Sanders and you have Boston Scott. This is something Brian Westbrook talked about with us on Inside the Birds TV, which everybody can still check out. It was about a month or two ago. And it was very telling because we were talking about Miles Sanders, not about Carson Wentz. But what he said was, Miles needs to be able to put in the work to be a dependable receiver. And he specifically said, and Carson needs to be able to do the same thing as well. And that to me was Brian's way of saying Carson's got to recognize that it's not just a dump off. There's a weapon in space there who has the ball, who can make something happen if you just give him the opportunity. So that is something I think, Adam, that you and I will talk about a whole lot, especially if it doesn't change coming up this season. Those were great questions. Thank everybody for their Ask ITB submissions. And remember, the best way to get them answered is on our Facebook community page or leaving a 5-star review on Apple Reviews and asking a question there. That's going to do it for this edition of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. Thanks to our producer, Hunter Brody. Check out his work on YouTube. It's called Sports Talk with Broads. And check out his podcast. It's called Process. He does that with former Villanova basketball star Darrell Reynolds. I'm sure they'll be having a lot to say about the Philadelphia 76ers. And check out Hunter's work on Twitter at Broads81. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.